Get out of my booth. Now. The words cut through the Burger King at 11:47 p.m. like a blade through grease-stained air. Raymond Thompson, everyone called him Crusher, stood at the edge of Table 7, his massive frame casting shadows across the cracked vinyl seat where Sarah Miller sat finishing her late dinner. 280 pounds of leather-wrapped muscle, adorned with iron skull's patches that caught the fluorescent light in ways that made them look like warnings. Sarah didn't look up from her chicken sandwich. She took another bite, chewed slowly, swallowed. The receipt beside her tray read number 7749, timestamp 11:28 p.m. She'd been sitting here 19 minutes. Her delivery uniform, navy blue with the Quick Drop logo, was still damp from the rain outside. 4 more bikers materialized from different corners of the restaurant. They moved with practiced coordination, forming a semicircle around her booth. The one they called Snake stood near the entrance, arms crossed. Diesel blocked the path to the restrooms. Roadkill positioned himself by the counter where the night manager, Elena Torres, had suddenly become very interested in counting the register. The 5th, a younger member named Torch, hovered near the kitchen door. Sarah finally raised her eyes. 35 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, she had the kind of face that made people think suburban mom, rather than what she actually was. Her hands remained steady on the table, fingers relaxed. "I'm not finished eating." Thompson's laugh sounded like grinding gears. "You are now." He reached for her tray. What happened next would later require frame-by-frame analysis of the security footage to fully understand. Sarah's left hand caught Thompson's wrist, while her right gripped his leather collar. Using his own momentum and a technique perfected in Kandahar province years ago, she redirected his considerable weight in an arc that ended with his back slamming onto Table 7. The Formica surface cracked with a sound like breaking bones. The impact sent receipts flying. Number 7749 fluttered through the air, landing face up on the floor. Through the spiderweb of cracks in the table's surface, something metallic gleamed. A USB drive that had been hidden inside a carefully carved hollow. The other 4 bikers froze for exactly 1.3 seconds. Fatal hesitation. Sarah was already moving. She used the table's edge as a pivot point, spinning low to sweep Snake's legs while her elbow found Diesel's solar plexus. Roadkill reached for something in his jacket. She caught his arm, twisted, and his own momentum sent him face first into the condiment station. Torch actually tried to run, but Sarah's perfectly thrown salt shaker caught him behind the knee, dropping him into a booth where his head met the table with a dull thud. 7.3 seconds total. 5 large men down, 1 woman standing. But here's where our story really begins. Because if you're watching this thinking it's just about a tough delivery driver defending herself, you're only seeing what they wanted you to see. Like that receipt number, 7749, or the fact that Judge Harrison was already walking through the door with a briefcase that would change everything. If this grabbed your attention, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what's really happening here. And if you think this story deserves it, that thanks button helps us dig deeper into cases like this. By the way, what city are you watching from? Drop it in the comments. I'm curious where stories like this resonate. Thompson groaned from his position on the cracked table, trying to process how a delivery driver half his size had just destroyed his crew. But Sarah wasn't looking at him anymore. Her attention had shifted to the man in the expensive suit who'd just entered. Judge William Harrison of the Third Circuit Court, carrying a briefcase that seemed too heavy for just legal documents. "Right on time," Sarah murmured, though no one else heard it over Thompson's cursing. Let me rewind 23 minutes. Sarah Miller had started her shift at 11:24 p.m., clocking in at the Quick Drop Dispatch Center 3 blocks away. She'd driven delivery routes in Oak Ridge for 18 months now, always the night shift, always the same quadrant of town. The Iron Skulls had noticed her patterns, how she regularly stopped at this Burger King during her break, always ordered the same thing, always sat in the same corner booth with her back to the wall. They thought they'd identified an easy target, a woman alone, late at night, in their territory. They had no idea that Sarah Miller had spent 4 years in Afghanistan with Delta Force. They didn't know her mother, Eleanor Miller, was at that very moment sitting in what looked like a wheelchair in their modest home on Maple Street, but was actually operating a communications hub that would make the NSA jealous. The Iron Skulls saw a delivery driver. They didn't see the Bronze Star recipient who'd run reconnaissance operations in places that made Oak Ridge look like Disneyland. Back in the present, Judge Harrison stood frozen in the doorway, his Armani suit suddenly looking less impressive. His eyes darted between the scattered bikers and Sarah, calculating rapidly. The briefcase in his hand, leather, expensive, with gold clasps that caught the light, seemed to grow heavier. "We're closed," Elena Torres called out from behind the counter, though the hours posted on the door clearly showed they were open until 2 a.m. Harrison's practiced courthouse smile flickered into place. "I'm just here for a coffee. Long night ahead." That's when another player entered the scene. A man in a clean button-down shirt and khakis, looking like he'd just left a PTA meeting. Martin Webb, 38, former Yale Law dropout, current community mediator for local disputes. He rushed to Thompson's side with convincing concern. "My God, what happened here? Is everyone all right? Should we call 911? Sarah watched Webb's performance with professional interest. His positioning was perfect. Concerned citizen rushing to help, smartphone already out and recording. But she noticed how he angled the phone to capture only certain angles, how his feet were positioned to block the view of the cracked table and the USB drive still gleaming through the damage. "Just a misunderstanding," Thompson wheezed, trying to sit up. His massive frame made the damaged table groan. "The lady and I were having a disagreement about seating arrangements." Webb nodded sympathetically, still filming. "These late-night situations can escalate so quickly. Maybe we should all just calm down, go our separate ways." But Sarah wasn't done cataloging the players. In the corner booth, someone who looked homeless sat nursing a coffee. Ratty army jacket, unkempt beard, the 1,000-yard stare of too many bad nights. Except his boots were too new, his watch too expensive when it caught the light, and his positioning gave him perfect sight lines to every exit. This was Agent Mitchell, DEA, 6 months into his cover as Murphy the Vagrant Veteran. The kitchen door swung open slightly, revealing another piece of the puzzle. Tommy Rodriguez, 29, had been mopping floors at this Burger King for 3 months. ATF badge hidden in his wallet, chemistry degree from Penn State on his wall at home. Wife 8 months pregnant and worried sick every night he went undercover. His mop bucket, currently parked by the freezer, contained more than dirty water. The recording equipment inside had been capturing every conversation in the building for weeks. "Nobody needs to call anyone," Thompson said, finally managing to stand. His leather vest hung askew, revealing the Glock tucked into his waistband. Just a friendly conversation that got out of hand. Sarah remained silent, assessing. The USB drive in the broken table contained something worth protecting. Webb's careful filming suggested legal preparation. Harrison's briefcase probably held payment. The question was, payment for what? Elena Torres emerged from behind the counter, wringing her hands in apparent distress. 31 years old, originally from El Paso, she'd been assistant manager here for 3 years. What the Iron Skulls didn't know was that her accounting degree wasn't being wasted on fast food. She'd been encoding transaction records in receipt numbers, building a paper trail that led straight to the Sinaloa cartel. "Please," Elena said, "no trouble. We don't want problems." Webb stepped forward, peacemaker persona fully engaged. "Of course not. I'm sure this was all just a misunderstanding. Miss," he looked at Sarah's name tag. "Miller, was it? I'm sure these gentlemen meant no harm." The irony was thick enough to spread on toast. 5 bikers had surrounded a lone woman, threatened her, tried to physically remove her from her seat. And now Webb was painting it as a misunderstanding. Sarah finally spoke. "They asked me to leave. I declined. They insisted. I defended myself." "Defended yourself?" Snake had recovered enough to speak, rubbing his throat where Sarah's strike had landed. "You assaulted us." Webb's phone captured it all, but from an angle that conveniently missed the intimidation that started it. This was the game. Provoke, document the response. Use the legal system as a weapon. It might have worked on someone else. "The security cameras will show what happened," Sarah said simply. Harrison finally moved from the doorway, approaching the counter with studied casualness. "Just a coffee. Black," he told Elena, who scrambled to serve him despite the chaos. The briefcase never left his hand. That briefcase contained $50,000 in non-sequential bills, payment for 3 years of fixed sentences, dismissed charges, and convenient case delays that had kept the Iron Skulls operating despite multiple arrests. Harrison had been their cleanup crew, their get-out-of-jail card, their insurance policy against the justice system. But tonight was different. Tonight, the payment was for something bigger. Thompson's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed. The text from Webb, sent moments before entering, read, "Package under Table 7. Judge ready for pickup. Confirmed delivery." The USB drive. It wasn't just hidden, it had been planted. The whole confrontation was staged to create a distraction while the exchange happened. Except Sarah's defensive maneuver had cracked the table, exposing the very thing they were trying to hide. "Interesting place to store data," Sarah observed, looking directly at Webb. His mask slipped for just a second, a flash of recognition, calculation, fear. Then the mediator's smile returned. "I'm not sure what you mean." From his corner booth, Mitchell shifted slightly. His hand moved to his coffee cup, but Sarah caught the micro-movement of his fingers tapping a pattern on the table. Morse code. "Package exposed. Await signal." The air in the Burger King grew thick with unspoken threats. 7 players, each with their own agenda, all pretending to be something they weren't. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that made everyone look suspicious. Elena's hands shook as she prepared Harrison's coffee. The judge waited with practiced patience, but sweat beaded on his forehead despite the air conditioning. He knew something had gone wrong, but not what or how badly. Thompson tried to salvage the situation. "Look, lady, we're willing to forget this happened. You go your way, we go ours. Nobody needs to make this complicated." "Too late for that," Sarah replied. She pulled out her phone, appeared to check the time. In reality, she'd just activated a signal that would change everything. 2 miles away, in the house on Maple Street, Eleanor Miller received her daughter's alert. 68 years old, arthritis in her hands. She looked like everyone's grandmother. The neighbors thought she was disabled, dependent on Sarah for everything. They didn't know about the ham radio setup in the basement, the encrypted satellite phone, or the 3 computer monitors currently showing feeds from traffic cameras, security systems, and federal databases. "Phoenix is hot," Eleanor said into her headset. "All units stand by for confirmation." The use of the codename Phoenix wasn't random. 18 months ago, Sarah Miller had been recruited for one final operation. Not by the military, but by a joint task force that didn't officially exist. Operation Phoenix Rising targeted the intersection of organized crime, judicial corruption, and international drug cartels. Oak Ridge was supposed to be a quiet entry point, a small town where the big players thought they could operate unnoticed. They were wrong. Back at the Burger King, Webb made his move. "Perhaps we should all sit down, discuss this like civilized people. I'm sure we can reach an understanding." He gestured toward Table 7, the broken one with the exposed USB drive. It was bold, almost desperate. If he could get to the drive, Pocket it during the negotiation. Maybe this could still be salvaged. Sarah stepped between him and the table. I don't think so. You don't understand what you're interfering with, Webb said, dropping the mediator act for just a moment. Enlighten me. Webb glanced at Thompson, at Harrison, at Elena, calculating whether to maintain the charade or reveal more cards. Finally, he made a choice. This is bigger than some late-night altercation, Webb said carefully. There are business interests at stake, investments, supply chains that keep this town's economy running. Interesting way to describe drug trafficking, Sarah observed. The word hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Harrison's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. Elena made a small sound, quickly stifled. Thompson's hand moved toward his concealed weapon, but Webb laughed. Drug trafficking? That's quite an accusation, Miss Miller. I hope you have evidence to support such a claim. Sarah smiled for the first time since the confrontation began. Actually, I do. She reached into her delivery bag, slowly, telegraphing the movement so nobody got trigger-happy. What she pulled out looked like a standard delivery scanner, the kind every quick-drop driver carried. But when she pressed a specific sequence of buttons, its screen displayed something else entirely. A federal warrant. Sarah Miller, Task Force Phoenix. And you're all under arrest. The explosion of movement that followed would later require multiple camera angles to fully reconstruct. Thompson went for his gun. Mitchell threw off his homeless disguise, revealing the tactical vest underneath, his DEA badge gleaming. Rodriguez abandoned his mop, pulling his ATF credentials while blocking the kitchen exit. But the real chaos came from an unexpected source. Elena Torres pulled a pistol from under the counter and pointed it at Sarah. "Nobody moves!" Elena screamed. "I'm not going back to prison." The assistant manager wasn't just encoding cartel records, she was protecting them. 3 years earlier, she'd been arrested for embezzlement, cut a deal, and been placed in Oak Ridge as part of witness protection. But the cartel had found her, threatened her father in El Paso, and turned her into their inside person. She wasn't just a victim. She'd become a perpetrator. "Elena," Sarah said, hands visible but not raised. "You don't want to do this. You don't know what they'll do to my family. We can protect them. We already have your father in custody, safe custody. He's been working with us for 6 months." Elena's gun wavered. The lie was perfectly delivered, but it was still a lie. They didn't have her father. They didn't even know where he was. But sometimes in these moments, a lie could save lives. Webb saw his opportunity in the distraction. He lunged for the USB drive in the cracked table. Sarah moved to intercept, but Elena's gun swung toward her, forcing a dodge. Thompson finally got his weapon clear of its holster. Mitchell drew his service pistol. Rodriguez pulled his backup piece. Everyone was armed. Everyone was aiming at someone else. The Burger King had become a Mexican standoff with French fries. That's when the lights went out. Complete darkness for 3 seconds. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. In those 3 seconds of darkness, positions changed, alliances shifted, and someone made a crucial mistake. When the red lights came on, the USB drive was gone. Webb stood by the broken table, his hand in his pocket, trying to look confused like everyone else. But Sarah had counted positions, memorized where everyone was standing. Webb had moved 6 feet in 3 seconds, directly to the table and back. "Martin," she said conversationally, her own weapon now drawn but pointed at the floor. "You're going to want to hand that over." "Hand what over?" Webb's confusion seemed genuine, but his left hand remained firmly in his pocket. This is where the story gets interesting, because Webb wasn't the only one who'd moved in the darkness. Judge Harrison had set his briefcase on the counter and backed against the wall, hands raised like a civilian caught in crossfire. But the briefcase had been opened and closed. The latches were in different positions than before. Elena still held her gun, but her stance had changed. She wasn't aiming at Sarah anymore. She was covering Webb. Whatever loyalty she had to the cartel had shifted in those 3 seconds of darkness. "He's not who you think he is," Elena said to Sarah. "None of this is what you think." Sarah processed this, her tactical mind running scenarios. Webb with the USB. Elena covering him. Harrison's briefcase tampered with. Thompson and his crew still armed but confused. Mitchell and Rodriguez maintaining overwatch. 7 players had become 3 factions. And the alliances weren't what anyone expected. You know what? I'm starting to think Elena's right. If you're wondering who's really running this operation, Webb, Harrison, or someone we haven't seen yet, drop your guess in the comments right now. Is the judge the real mastermind, or is he just another pawn? Thompson broke the standoff with characteristic subtlety. "I don't know what kind of cop game this is, but we're leaving. Now." "Nobody's leaving," Mitchell said, his DEA credentials visible in his vest pocket. "This is a federal crime scene." "Federal crime scene?" Thompson laughed. "For a bar fight? You feds really got nothing better to do?" That's when Rodriguez spoke up from his position by the kitchen. "Actually, we do. Like the 40 kilos of methamphetamine in your warehouse on Riverside Drive. The weapon shipments coming through the port of Oakland. The money laundering operation you're running through," he looked directly at Harrison, "certain judicial chambers." Harrison's face went pale. "I want my lawyer." "You are a lawyer," Sarah pointed out. "Or did you forget that in all the excitement?" Webb finally took his hand out of his pocket. Empty. The USB drive wasn't there. He looked genuinely puzzled now, the confusion no longer an act. "It was right there. I grabbed it. I know I did." Sarah smiled again. "Tommy, want to show Mr. Webb what's in your mop bucket?" Rodriguez reached into the seemingly innocent cleaning bucket and pulled out the USB drive, sealed in an evidence bag. "Retrieved during the blackout. Thank you for confirming you attempted to steal evidence, Mr. Webb. That's another charge for the list." But Webb wasn't looking at the USB anymore. His eyes were fixed on Elena, understanding dawning. "You switched it. In the dark, you gave me the decoy." Elena's gun never wavered. "Insurance policy. The real drive has everything. Transactions, recordings, account numbers. 3 years of evidence." "Your cartel," Thompson protested. "You work for them." "I work for whoever keeps my father alive," Elena corrected. "And right now, that's the federal government." This was the moment the real plan revealed itself. Elena Torres hadn't been turned by the cartel. She'd been recruited by the DEA from the beginning. Her embezzlement charge, her witness protection, even her father's supposed danger, all carefully crafted cover stories. She'd spent 3 years building the cartel's trust, encoding their transactions, creating an unbreakable chain of evidence. The USB drive contained everything. Account numbers for money laundering operations, recorded conversations between Webb and cartel representatives, documentation of Harrison's judicial corruptions, even Thompson's communication with Mexican suppliers. But more importantly, it contained something nobody expected. Evidence of a 4th player, someone higher up the chain than anyone in this room. Sarah's phone buzzed. A message from Eleanor. "Raven inbound. 2 minutes." Raven was the code name for someone Sarah had hoped never to see again. Deputy Director Patricia Coleman of the DEA, her former handler from her task force days, and quite possibly the most dangerous person in federal law enforcement. "We need to clear this scene," Sarah announced. "Now!" "Nobody's going anywhere," Thompson started. But the sound of helicopters cut him off. Not 1, but 3, converging on their location from different directions. Webb's phone rang. He looked at the caller ID and his face went white. Without answering, he dropped the phone like it was radioactive. "Who was that?" Sarah demanded. "Dead man's call," Webb said. "If that phone rings and I don't answer with the right code word within 30 seconds, Every cartel asset in 3 states gets a burn notice. My location, my photo, and a price on my head. 20 seconds remaining. "What's the code word?" Sarah asked. "Why would I tell you that?" "Because if you don't, you're dead anyway." 15 seconds. Webb looked around the room. At Thompson, who'd betrayed everyone for money. At Harrison, who'd sold justice for gambling debts. At Elena, who'd spent 3 years living a lie. Finally, his eyes settled on Sarah. "Phoenix," he said. "The code word is Phoenix." Sarah's blood chilled. That was the operation name, the classified designation that only a handful of people should have known. Either Webb had a source inside the task force, or— "Answer it!" she ordered. Webb picked up the phone with 5 seconds to spare. "Phoenix," he said, then listened. His expression cycled through confusion, fear, and finally, resignation. He held the phone out to Sarah. "It's for you." She took it, knowing her cover was now completely blown. "Miller!" The voice on the other end was electronically distorted, but still somehow familiar. "Hello, Sarah. I hear you've been busy tonight. Who is this?" "Someone who's been watching your career with great interest. Tell me, how's your mother? Still running communications from that wheelchair of hers?" Sarah's grip on the phone tightened. Whoever this was knew about Eleanor, knew about their operation. "If you threaten her—" "Threaten? Oh, Sarah, I'm not threatening anyone. I'm offering you a choice. The USB drive Tommy's holding contains enough evidence to bring down the Iron Skulls, convict Judge Harrison, and put Webb away for 20 years. But it also contains something else. Evidence that implicates someone you care about. Someone who's been helping you all along without realizing they were also helping me." The helicopters were getting closer. Through the window, Sarah could see vehicles surrounding the Burger King. Not just law enforcement, but black SUVs with government plates, the kind that usually meant someone very important or very dangerous had arrived. "I don't believe you," Sarah said. "Check file 7749 on the drive. That receipt number isn't random, is it? It's a date, July 7th, 1949, your mother's birthday. She's been encoding intelligence in those numbers for 40 years, Sarah. First for the NSA, then for various black operations, and for the last 18 months, for me." Sarah's mind raced. Eleanor had been helping coordinate the operation, but she'd also been receiving intelligence from other sources, cross-referencing data, building patterns. If someone had been feeding her contaminated information, using her to unknowingly serve another agenda. The front door of the Burger King exploded inward. Not literally, but the force of entry, the precision of movement, the immediate control of space made it feel like an explosion. 6 tactical officers in full gear, no agency markings visible, weapons raised but not aimed. Behind them walked a woman in a conservative black suit, silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, eyes that had seen too much and forgiven nothing. Deputy Director Patricia Coleman. Raven. "Weapons on the ground," Coleman ordered. "Everyone, now." Even Mitchell and Rodriguez complied, their federal credentials meaningless in the face of Coleman's authority. Sarah was the last to lower her weapon, her eyes never leaving Coleman's face. "Director," Sarah said carefully. "Agent Miller." Coleman's voice could have frozen helium. "Or should I say, former Agent Miller, since you've been officially dead for 2 years." Thompson looked between them, confused. "Dead? She's been delivering sandwiches all over town." "The best covers are the ones nobody questions," Coleman said. She surveyed the scene. The broken table, the scattered receipts, the mix of criminals and federal agents all frozen in place. What a mess, and all for what? A USB drive with some financial records? "It's more than that," Sarah said. "You know it's more than that." Coleman smiled, and it was terrifying. "Yes, it is. Tommy, be a dear and hand me that drive." Rodriguez hesitated. His ATF training said to maintain chain of custody. His instincts said Coleman was dangerous, but his career said refusing a deputy director was suicide. He handed over the USB. Coleman pocketed it without looking at it. This never happened. The Iron Skulls were arrested in a routine drug bust. Judge Harrison had a heart attack at home. Tragic, really. Mr. Webb decided to enter witness protection. And Elena Torres, well, she was never here at all. "You can't just," Mitchell started. "Can't I?" "Agent Mitchell, you've been undercover for 6 months. In that time, you've developed a drinking problem, missed 3 check-ins, and failed to file proper reports. Your testimony would be considered unreliable at best." She turned to Rodriguez. "Agent Rodriguez, your wife is 8 months pregnant. Complications have developed. She needs specialized care, only available at certain federal medical facilities. I'm sure you want what's best for your family." The threat was subtle but clear. Comply or suffer consequences. But Sarah wasn't having it. "Patricia, you trained me better than this. Threatening federal agents? Destroying evidence? This isn't you. Isn't it?" Coleman walked closer until she was standing directly in front of Sarah. "You disappeared for 2 years, Sarah. Faked your death, abandoned your team, left me to clean up your mess. And for what? To play delivery driver in some backwater town. To stop this," Sarah gestured around the room, "the corruption, the drugs, the violence, to do what we're supposed to do, protect people." Coleman laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Protect people? Is that what you think we do? We maintain order, Sarah. We keep the balance. Sometimes that means letting certain operations continue because shutting them down would cause more chaos than allowing them to exist. The Iron Skulls are trafficking meth to kids, and they're also the only thing keeping the Sinaloa cartel from moving into this territory directly. Would you prefer dealing with Thompson and his 5 bikes, or with 50 cartel soldiers?" The logic was cold, utilitarian, and completely amoral. It was also, Sarah realized with growing horror, exactly the kind of thinking that had led to this moment. "You're the voice on the phone," Sarah said quietly. "You're the one who's been feeding Eleanor intelligence." Coleman's smile widened. "Your mother is brilliant, Sarah. Truly gifted at pattern recognition and analysis. It would have been wasteful not to utilize her skills. You used her. You used me. I positioned assets where they would be most effective. The Iron Skulls needed to be contained, but not eliminated. Harrison was useful as long as his corruption stayed within acceptable parameters. Webb was actually one of mine, or he was supposed to be until he got greedy." Webb's head snapped up. "You said if I helped with the Portland operation." "I said a lot of things, Martin. But then you started freelancing, making deals with the cartel directly. That USB contains evidence of your side business, doesn't it? The one you thought I didn't know about?" The room felt smaller suddenly, everyone realizing they were trapped in a web that extended far beyond Oak Ridge, beyond Oregon, possibly beyond anything they understood. That's when Eleanor's voice crackled through Sarah's earpiece. She'd been listening the entire time. "Sarah, honey, it's time for Plan B." Plan B had been Eleanor's idea, a contingency for if the operation went sideways. Sarah had thought it was paranoid, unnecessary. Now she was grateful for her mother's foresight. "Mom, are you sure?" "I've been sure since Patricia recruited you 15 years ago. She's been playing long games since before you were born." Coleman's eyes narrowed. "Eleanor, I should have known you were listening." Eleanor's voice came through the Burger King's speaker system. She'd hacked it remotely, because of course she had. "Hello, Patricia. It's been what, 20 years since Berlin?" 22, Coleman corrected. "You always were too smart for your own good. Smart enough to make copies of everything. The real USB Tommy had? That's copy number 4. The original is already uploaded to servers in 6 different countries. Dead man's switch activated. If anything happens to anyone in this room, everything goes public. And I do mean everything, including your black budget operations, your cartel protection schemes, and that incident in Nicaragua you thought was buried. Coleman's composure finally cracked. You don't know what you're playing with, Eleanor. There are forces. Spare me the national security lecture. I wrote half the protocols you're violating. Sarah felt the shift in the room's dynamics. Coleman's tactical team was getting nervous, fingers tightening on weapons. Thompson and his bikers were looking for exits. Harrison had actually started praying, despite being an atheist for 40 years. Elena still held her gun, now pointed at Coleman. Webb laughed bitterly. So we're all just pawns in some game between two old spies. Welcome to the real world, Rodriguez muttered. That's when the lights went out again, but this time it lasted longer than 3 seconds. In the darkness, Sarah heard glass breaking, the front window, 3 gunshots, suppressed, professional. Someone screaming, Harrison. Motorcycles starting, the iron skulls fleeing. A helicopter getting dangerously close, not law enforcement. When the emergency lights came back on, the scene had changed dramatically. Coleman was on the ground, unconscious but breathing, a tranquilizer dart in her neck. Her tactical team was down too, all tranked with military precision. Harrison was huddled under a table, physically unharmed but mentally broken. Thompson and 3 of his bikers had escaped. Snake lay unconscious by the door he'd tried to exit through. Webb was gone. A Martin Webb-shaped hole in the back wall suggested he'd had an explosive exit strategy. Elena still stood exactly where she'd been, gun raised, untouched by whatever had happened. Rodriguez and Mitchell were also unharmed, their weapons drawn but no targets available. And standing in the middle of it all was someone new. A woman Sarah recognized but had never expected to see again. "Hello, sis," said the newcomer. Rebecca Miller, Sarah's older sister, supposedly killed in action 6 years ago in Syria. Very much alive, wearing tactical gear with no insignia, holding a tranquilizer rifle with practiced ease. "Becca?" Sarah's voice cracked. "How?" "Same way you survived your death, I imagine. Patricia has a thing for recruiting sisters, doesn't she?" Rebecca surveyed the unconscious Coleman with satisfaction, though I doubt she expected us to compare notes. The helicopter sound was getting closer and multiplying. Not one aircraft now, but several, converging on their location. "We need to go," Rebecca said urgently. "The real cleanup crew will be here in 90 seconds, and they won't be as gentle as I was. I can't just leave." "Yes, you can. Mom's already packing. Safe house in Vancouver is prepped. Elena comes with us. She's been working for me for 18 months. The ATF and DEA boys will be fine. They're legitimate agents with solid cover stories. Harrison and the bikers? Not our problem." Sarah's world was reshaping itself too quickly to process. Her dead sister was alive, had apparently been running a parallel operation, and was now executing an extraction that would have made their Delta Force instructors proud. "Wait, did you catch that? Rebecca's been alive this whole time, running her own operation against Coleman. If you're still processing this twist within a twist within a twist, and wondering who's really on whose side, we're about to blow this whole thing wide open. The next 10 minutes determine whether Sarah walks away or fights back against something bigger than she ever imagined." Rodriguez stepped forward. "I'm not leaving. My wife is already at the Federal Medical Facility in Seattle," Rebecca interrupted. "Moved this afternoon for her safety. You can join her after debrief, or you can stay here and explain to whoever's coming why Coleman and her team are unconscious." Mitchell had been silent throughout, processing. Finally, he spoke. "You're Phoenix, the real Phoenix. The whole operation. It was never about the iron skulls or the drugs. It was about Coleman." Rebecca smiled grimly. "Patricia Coleman has been running unauthorized operations for 15 years, using federal resources to manage criminal organizations instead of eliminating them, creating a shadow governance system where she decides who operates and who doesn't. Sarah's operation here? It was supposed to expose the street-level corruption. My operation was tracking the federal level. We just didn't know we were working toward the same goal until tonight. Eleanor's voice crackled through the speakers again. Girls, whatever family reunion you're having, you need to move. Satellite imagery shows convoy approaching from 3 directions. Federal plates, but not standard FBI or DEA configuration. Patricia's cleanup protocol is active. Sarah looked at her sister, at Elena, at the 2 federal agents who'd risked everything to be here. Then she looked at Coleman, unconscious on the floor, the woman who'd trained her, betrayed her, and tried to control her. The USB drive was still in Coleman's pocket. Sarah retrieved it, along with Coleman's phone and credentials. Elena, Rebecca's right. You're coming with us. Tommy, Mitchell, your choice. Stay and trust the system, or disappear and fight from the shadows. Rodriguez looked at Mitchell. They'd never worked together before tonight, but the shared experience had created an instant bond. My wife needs me, Rodriguez said. I stay. Mitchell nodded. Someone needs to control the narrative. We were here running a legitimate operation. Coleman arrived and complications ensued. We don't know anything about Miller Sisters or shadow operations. It was a solid cover story, one that would protect them while giving Sarah and Rebecca time to disappear. 30 seconds, Eleanor announced. Sarah grabbed the restaurant's incident logbook and quickly wrote, 11:47 p.m. Customer altercation resulted in property damage. Authorities notified. Manager on duty, E. Torres. She signed it S. Miller and added her actual employee ID number from QuickDrop. A final touch of authenticity to a completely fabricated reality. Rebecca was already at the back exit, Elena beside her. Sarah, now! But Sarah had one last thing to do. She knelt beside Coleman, checking her pulse, steady, her breathing, normal. Then she whispered in her unconscious mentor's ear, the student surpasses the teacher. Berlin rules. Coleman's eyes flickered open for just a second, unfocused but aware. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming a single word. Run. Whether it was warning or threat, Sarah didn't wait to find out. The 3 women exited through the kitchen, past the freezer where Elena's ledgers were hidden. Rebecca grabbed them. Through the delivery bay where a nondescript van waited, engine running. Behind the wheel sat Eleanor Miller, very much not disabled, wearing tactical gear that looked strange on her grandmother frame, but fit perfectly. About time, Eleanor said, shifting into drive. Hold on. They pulled away just as the first black SUV screeched into the Burger King parking lot. Through the rear window, Sarah watched figures in unmarked tactical gear storm the building. No agency letters, no identification, just efficient violence in human form. Who are they? Elena asked, her first words since revealing her true allegiance. Cleaners, Rebecca answered. Coleman's private army. Officially, they don't exist. Unofficially, they handle problems that can't be solved through normal channels. Problems like us, Sarah added. The van merged onto the interstate, heading north. Eleanor had disabled all GPS tracking, removed the plates, and somehow made a quick-drop delivery van invisible to every traffic camera in Oregon. Behind them, Oak Ridge was about to become a crime scene that would make national news, though the real story would never be told. So what now? Elena asked. Sarah and Rebecca exchanged glances. The Miller sisters, together again after 6 years of each thinking the other was dead. Now, Rebecca said, we disappear, regroup, and then we take down everyone involved in Coleman's network. That's dozens of people, Sarah pointed out. Judges, federal agents, cartel leaders, corporate executives. Coleman's reach goes everywhere. Then we'd better get started, Eleanor said from the driver's seat. I've been collecting evidence for 20 years. Patricia made one mistake. She taught us too well. The van drove through the night. 4 women against a conspiracy that reached to the highest levels of government. In the Burger King behind them, Rodriguez and Mitchell were already crafting their reports, establishing the official narrative. Judge Harrison would be arrested, though his connections would ensure a light sentence. Thompson and the Iron Skulls would scatter, some caught, others vanishing into the criminal underground. Webb's body would never be found. He'd activated an extraction protocol that turned him into smoke and rumors. But the real war was just beginning. Sarah pulled out the USB drive, examining it in the dim light. Such a small thing to cause so much chaos. But it wasn't about the drive anymore. It was about what the drive represented. Evidence. Truth. Power. "You know," she said to Rebecca, "when I started this, I just wanted to stop some drug dealers from hurting people." "And you did," Rebecca replied. "You also exposed something much bigger. Sometimes the small fights lead to the real war." Elena spoke up from the back seat. "My father, is he really safe?" "Safer than he was," Eleanor answered. "We moved him 2 days ago. He's in protective custody in Canada. Real protective custody, not Coleman's version." The relief on Elena's face was palpable. 3 years of living a lie, of being pulled between competing forces, of never knowing who to trust. Finally over. But Sarah knew better. It wasn't over. Coleman would recover. Her network would respond. And the Miller family had just painted massive targets on their backs. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number, but she recognized the cadence of the text. 11:47 won't be forgotten. Neither will Table 7. Watch the news tomorrow. A friend. She showed it to Rebecca, who frowned. Someone else was watching. Someone we didn't account for. "Coleman had enemies," Eleanor said. "We might have allies we don't know about. Or more enemies," Sarah thought but didn't say. The van continued north through the darkness, carrying 4 women who'd just declared war on one of the most powerful shadow organizations in America. Behind them, the lights of Oak Ridge faded into memory. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and possibly redemption. Sarah looked at the USB drive one more time, then handed it to her mother. "Your turn. Let's see what Patricia was really hiding." Eleanor pulled out a laptop that looked normal but had computing power that would make the NSA jealous. She inserted the USB, fingers flying across the keyboard as she bypassed encryption that should have taken weeks to crack. "Oh my," she said after a moment. "Girls, you need to see this." The screen showed financial records, as expected, but underneath those, hidden in metadata and encoded in transaction patterns, was something else entirely. A list of names, hundreds of them, government officials, military officers, corporate executives, foreign nationals. And next to each name, a designation: asset, target, or eliminated. Sarah found her own name: status, asset, compromised, retrieve or eliminate. Rebecca's name was there too: asset, rogue, eliminate on sight. Eleanor's entry was different: asset, critical, maintain at all costs. "She was playing us all," Rebecca breathed. "Every single one of us." But Eleanor was scrolling to a different section, one titled Operation Prometheus. "This isn't just about drugs or corruption," Eleanor said. Patricia was building something, a network completely outside government oversight, a private intelligence and enforcement apparatus that could operate globally without any accountability. "A shadow government," Sarah said. "No," Eleanor corrected, her voice grave. "A replacement government. Look at these projections. Within 5 years, her network would have effectively controlled federal law enforcement. Within 10, the judicial system. Within 15. She didn't need to finish. Total control. The van suddenly lurched as Eleanor swerved. A black helicopter had appeared from nowhere, searchlight blazing, tracking their movement. "They found us!" Elena shouted. But Eleanor was already reacting, taking an exit at dangerous speed, tires screaming. Not found. Allowed to run. They want to see where we go. So we lead them nowhere, Rebecca said, pulling equipment from a bag Sarah hadn't noticed. Mom, Highway 205 intersection in 2 miles. Sarah, take the wheel when I say. The next few minutes were controlled chaos. Rebecca assembled something that looked like a small drone. Eleanor pushed the van to its limits, weaving through late-night traffic. The helicopter maintained pursuit, joined now by vehicles on the ground. Now! Rebecca shouted. Sarah grabbed the wheel as Eleanor slid aside, maintaining speed and direction. Eleanor took Rebecca's device, made final adjustments, then opened the sunroof. The drone launched upward, straight at the helicopter. No explosion. That would have brought every agency down on them. Instead, an EMP pulse that killed the helicopter's electronics for exactly 3 seconds. 3 seconds for it to auto-rotate into emergency landing mode. 3 seconds for the van to disappear into an underpass and emerge looking completely different. Eleanor had activated some kind of adaptive camouflage that changed the van's apparent color and profile. They switched vehicles twice more in the next hour, each transition planned and precise. Finally, they arrived at a building Sarah recognized, an abandoned DEA safe house from her task force days. How do you know about this place? Sarah asked Rebecca. Same way I knew you'd be at that Burger King tonight. I've been watching you for 2 years, sis, making sure Coleman didn't decide to terminate rather than retrieve. Inside the safe house, the full scope of their situation became clear. Rebecca had turned it into a command center. Maps covered the walls, connected by colored strings like a conspiracy theorist's dream. Photos of Coleman's network members, financial records, operational plans. How long have you been planning this? Sarah asked. Since the day Coleman told me you were dead, Rebecca replied. She showed me your death certificate, your autopsy photos. Very convincing. Except I knew you, Sarah. You don't die that easily. Elena had been quiet, absorbing everything. Finally, she spoke. So what's the plan? We can't fight Coleman's entire network with just 4 people. 5, said a voice from the shadows. Everyone spun, weapons appearing from nowhere. But the figure that stepped into the light had his hands raised, a familiar face wearing an unfamiliar expression. Martin Webb. Alive, unharmed, and apparently on their side. Before you shoot, he said quickly, I have something you need. The real USB drive. The one from Table 7 was a decoy. Coleman knew that. What she didn't know was that I'd already switched the real one before tonight. He held up a different drive, this one marked with a small phoenix symbol. I've been undercover for 3 years, Webb continued. Not for Coleman, not for the cartel. For the only person who saw this coming before anyone else. He looked directly at Eleanor. Hello, handler, he said. Mission complete. Eleanor smiled, and suddenly she looked less like a grandmother and more like the master spy she'd always been. Hello, Martin. Welcome to the real Operation Phoenix. Sarah stared at Webb, then at her mother, processing this latest revelation. You've been running him this whole time? Eleanor nodded, her weathered hands steady on the laptop keyboard. Martin approached me 2 years ago. He'd discovered Coleman's network independently, through his work at Yale before he dropped out. His thesis advisor was murdered, made to look like suicide, after stumbling onto financial irregularities that led back to Coleman's operation. Webb set the USB drive on the table, careful not to make sudden movements with 4 weapons still loosely pointed in his direction. Professor Hartman was a good man, brilliant economist. He found patterns in federal spending that suggested massive funds were being redirected. When he tried to report it, he died. So you went undercover, Rebecca said, lowering her weapon slightly. Became what they expected, a corrupt lawyer willing to work with criminals. It wasn't hard, Webb replied with bitter humor. Yale law dropout with gambling debts and a dead mentor. Coleman's recruiters found me within 6 months. They thought they were turning me. Instead, Eleanor was feeding me exactly what to say and do to gain their trust. Sarah turned to her mother. "How many assets do you have? How many people have you been running without telling us?" Eleanor's expression was unreadable. 17 active, another 32 in reserve. Patricia taught me well during our NSA days, never rely on a single network. Always have contingencies. 17! Rebecca's voice carried a mix of admiration and frustration. "Mom, we could have coordinated." "No," Eleanor cut her off. "Coordination creates patterns. Patterns create vulnerabilities. Each asset operated independently, knowing only their piece. Tonight was the first time the streams converged." She turned the laptop screen toward them. The display showed a complex organizational chart with Coleman at the center, tentacles spreading to every major law enforcement agency, several courts, and multiple criminal organizations. "This is what we're really fighting," Eleanor continued. "Patricia didn't corrupt the system, she became the system. Every major drug bust in the last 5 years, she decided who got arrested and who walked. Every judicial appointment in 3 federal circuits, her influence. Every random audit that destroyed a political career. Her orders. Elena had been silent, absorbing this. Now she spoke up. The cartel connection? They knew about this? Some suspected, Webb answered. The smart ones realized their operations were being managed, not fought. As long as they paid the right people and stayed within certain boundaries, they were protected. Sarah studied the chart, her tactical mind analyzing weaknesses. There are too many nodes. Even with evidence, taking down Coleman won't stop this. Her lieutenants will just continue without her. Unless we take them all down simultaneously, Rebecca said. A coordinated strike across multiple jurisdictions. Which is exactly what we're going to do, Eleanor said. She pulled up another screen showing a timeline. In 6 hours, at exactly 6 a.m. Eastern Time, packages will be delivered to 17 major news outlets, the Department of Justice Inspector General, 4 congressional oversight committees, and every clean FBI field office in the country. Packages containing what? Sarah asked. Eleanor smiled grimly. Everything. Financial records, recorded conversations, video surveillance, documented orders for assassinations, evidence of judicial tampering, proof of protection rackets, 47 terabytes of data that Webb has been collecting, that you've been collecting, that Rebecca's been collecting, that my other assets have been gathering. It's enough to trigger the largest RICO investigation in history, Webb added. Conservative estimate? 300 arrests in the first wave alone, but Sarah saw the flaw immediately. Coleman will know the moment those packages are sent. She'll activate every contingency, burn every asset. People will die. Which is why, Eleanor said, pulling out a phone Sarah didn't recognize. We're going to give her something more important to worry about. She dialed a number from memory, put it on speaker. It rang once. Coleman's voice, cold and controlled despite having been tranquilized less than 2 hours ago. Eleanor, I wondered when you'd call. Hello, Patricia. Recovering well, I trust. Your daughter's handiwork, I assume. The tranquilizer was an elegant touch. Non-lethal but completely incapacitating. Very Rebecca. Rebecca and Sarah exchanged glances. Coleman didn't know they were listening. I have a proposition, Eleanor continued. Your network for our lives. You disappear, permanently. We destroy the evidence. Everyone walks away. Coleman laughed, a sound like ice cracking. You think I'd trust you? After tonight? You don't have a choice. In 6 hours, everything goes public. Your Swiss accounts, your Cayman shelters, that property in New Zealand you think nobody knows about. But more importantly, Patricia, Moscow. Silence on the line. Sarah saw her mother's expression harden. You remember Moscow, don't you? 1987. The diplomat's daughter. What was her name? Katya? You wouldn't. I kept the photos, Patricia, the real ones, before your cleanup crew arrived. That 16-year-old girl didn't kill herself. You made a mistake, and an innocent paid the price. The Kremlin would be very interested to know who really killed Ambassador Volkov's daughter. The silence stretched longer this time. Finally, Coleman spoke, her voice different now, older, tired. What do you really want, Eleanor? Justice. The network dismantled. You disappear forever. And one more thing. The locations of all your black sites. There are people being held who need to come home. If I refuse, Eleanor's voice turned to steel, then at 6 a.m., you become the most wanted woman on 7 continents. Every intelligence agency, every criminal organization you betrayed, every family member of someone you disappeared. They all learn exactly where to find you. Sarah watched her mother work, seeing clearly where she and Rebecca had inherited their skills. Eleanor Miller, suburban grandmother, was perhaps the most dangerous person in the room. I need time to consider, Coleman said. You have 1 hour. This number only. Eleanor hung up. The safe house fell silent. Finally, Elena asked the question they were all thinking. Will she deal? No, Eleanor, Sarah, and Rebecca said simultaneously. Webb looked confused. Then why? Because now she'll pull every resource to find us, Sarah explained. She'll activate her entire network, call in every asset, mobilize everyone she has. Which means, Rebecca continued, they'll all be exposed when the evidence drops. Active operations, ongoing communications, real-time proof of the conspiracy. Eleanor nodded approvingly. You girls always did understand tactics. Martin, is your insurance in place? Webb pulled out 3 phones, checking each. Dead man switches armed on all 3. If I don't input codes every 4 hours, everything uploads automatically. Good. Elena, I need you to do something that might be difficult. The former assistant manager, or whatever she really was, straightened. What do you need? Call your handler at the cartel. Tell them Coleman's network is collapsing. Offer them a deal. Safe passage for their people out of Coleman's web in exchange for testimony. Elena's eyes widened. They'll kill me for even suggesting. No, they won't, Eleanor interrupted. Because you'll also tell them about the $40 million Coleman has been skimming from their payments. Martin found the records 3 weeks ago. Webb nodded, pulling up financial documents on his phone. Coleman was taking 30% off the top of every protection payment. The cartels thought they were paying $100 million a year. They were actually paying $140. That's cause for war in their world, Elena breathed. She took the phone Eleanor offered, walked to the corner and dialed. Sarah moved to the window, checking sight lines. The safe house was secure, but that wouldn't last. Coleman's people were good. They'd find them within hours. We need to move, she said. Not yet, Eleanor replied. There's one more call to make. She dialed another number. This time, the voice that answered was familiar to Sarah. Deputy Director Harold Morrison, her old boss at the task force, the one who'd signed off on her fake death. Eleanor Miller, Morrison said, sounding unsurprised. I wondered when you'd surface. Hello, Harold. I assume you're aware of tonight's events. I have Coleman in my office right now demanding resources to hunt down what she calls rogue elements. She's also suggesting your daughters are terrorists. Sarah's jaw clenched, but Eleanor remained calm. And what do you think, Harold? I think Patricia Coleman has been running an unauthorized intelligence network for 15 years, and you're about to expose it. I also think you called me because you need something. Immunity, Eleanor said simply. For Sarah, Rebecca, Martin Webb, Elena Torres, and myself. Full immunity in exchange for testimony and evidence. That's a big ask. It's a small price for taking down the largest corruption network in U.S. history. You'll be a hero, Harold, the man who cleaned house. Morrison was quiet for a moment. I'll need something concrete, a show of good faith. Eleanor looked at Webb, who understood immediately. He uploaded something to Morrison's secure server. "Check your files," Eleanor said. "That's Coleman's hit list. 7 names scheduled for elimination in the next 72 hours. All witnesses or investigators who got too close." They heard Morrison's sharp intake of breath as he read. "Jesus Christ. Judge Matthews is on here. Senator Warren's aide. That journalist from the Post." "McKenna," Eleanor confirmed. "She's been investigating Coleman's network for 2 years, has most of the pieces but not the connection. Her article was supposed to run Monday. Coleman planned to prevent that permanently." "If this is real," firmly. "It's real, Harold, and the clock is ticking. Those packages go out in 5.5 hours. You can be ahead of it, controlling the narrative, or you can be scrambling to catch up while Coleman burns everything to the ground." "What about Coleman herself? She has resources, connections." "Leave Patricia to us," Eleanor said, and there was something in her voice that made Sarah shiver. "Just have your teams ready to move at 6 a.m. "Eleanor, what you're doing, it's dangerous. Coleman won't go down without a fight." "I'm counting on it," Eleanor replied and hung up. Elena returned from her call, face pale but determined. "It's done. The Sinaloa leadership wants Coleman's blood. They're pulling all their people back, cutting ties with her network. They also want to testify. Immunity in exchange for information about which judges and cops Coleman controlled." "The rats are fleeing the ship," Webb observed. "Once word spreads that Coleman's operation is compromised." He was interrupted by an alert on one of his phones. "Motion sensors at the perimeter. 3 vehicles approaching. No lights." Sarah and Rebecca moved simultaneously, weapons appearing in their hands. "How many exits?" Sarah asked. 4, Rebecca replied, "but they'll have them all covered. Coleman doesn't make amateur mistakes." Eleanor stood, closing the laptop with calm finality. "Then we don't run. We let them come." "Mom," Sarah started, but Eleanor raised a hand. "Trust me. I've been planning this for 20 years. Patricia thinks she's hunting us. She's actually walking into the trap." The sound of engines grew closer. Through the window, Sarah counted 12 operatives taking positions around the safe house. Professional deployment, overlapping fields of fire, no gaps in coverage. "They'll breach in 2 minutes," Rebecca assessed. Eleanor pulled out one more phone. This one looked ancient, a model from the early 2000s. She typed a short message. "Phoenix rises." "What did you just do?" Webb asked. "Activated the cavalry," Eleanor replied. "You didn't think we were really alone, did you?" The first breach charge detonated against the front door. Smoke grenades followed, filling the entrance with dense gray clouds. Sarah grabbed Elena, pulling her behind cover as Rebecca took position at the stairs. But the smoke cleared to reveal nothing. No tactical team storming in, no gunfire, just silence. Then, from outside, shouting, orders being given, the sound of weapons being dropped. Sarah risked a look through the window. Coleman's operatives were on their knees, hands behind their heads. Standing over them were figures in full tactical gear. But these wore badges: FBI, DEA, U.S. Marshals. Real federal agents, not Coleman's shadow team. "Clear the house!" someone shouted. "Federal agents! Anyone inside, come out slowly, hands visible." Eleanor smiled. "Shall we?" They exited to find 24 legitimate federal agents securing the scene. The lead agent, a woman Sarah recognized from her task force days, approached carefully. "Agent Miller," she said to Sarah, "Director Morrison sent us. You're under protective custody, all of you." But Sarah was looking past her, at the figure standing by one of the vehicles. Coleman herself, not in custody, watching with an expression of cold calculation. "Why isn't she arrested?" Sarah demanded. "No warrant," the agent replied. "Yet, Director Morrison says to tell you, 6 a.m. Everything changes at 6 a.m. Coleman walked closer, stopping just outside the federal perimeter. Her eyes locked on Eleanor's. "You orchestrated all of this. 20 years of planning, using your own daughters as bait." Eleanor stepped forward, matching Coleman's stare. "You killed my husband." The words hung in the air like a thunderbolt. Sarah and Rebecca both turned to their mother in shock. "Dad died in a car accident," Rebecca said. "No," Eleanor replied, never breaking eye contact with Coleman. "He died in a car that Patricia sabotaged because he discovered her first operation. Robert was NSA, like me. He found evidence that Patricia was selling intelligence to private military contractors. He was going to report it." Coleman's expression didn't change. "Prove it." Eleanor held up the ancient phone. "I don't have to prove it, Patricia. You just did. This phone has been recording everything for 20 years. Every call you made from your secure lines, every order you gave. The NSA built a back door into these models in 1999. You knew that, which is why you had everyone switch to newer phones, everyone except me. That's illegal surveillance, inadmissible. In court, yes. But in the court of public opinion? When the families of everyone you've killed hear your voice ordering their deaths? When your own operatives realize you've been recording them too, ready to sacrifice them if needed?" Coleman took a step back, her composure finally cracking. "You're destroying everything. The networks I built keep this country safe." "Safe?" Sarah stepped forward, anger breaking through her control. "You protect drug dealers. You murder witnesses. You've turned federal law enforcement into your personal empire." "I maintain order," Coleman snarled. "Without my networks, chaos." "Without your networks," Rebecca interrupted, "law enforcement can actually do its job." The sound of helicopters interrupted them, multiple aircraft converging on their location. Not the black, unmarked ones from before, but news helicopters. Someone had leaked the location. "That would be me," Webb said, holding up his phone. "Live streaming for the last 10 minutes, 14 million viewers and climbing." Coleman's face went white. Her carefully maintained anonymity, the shadows she'd operated from for decades, gone in an instant. "You have no idea what you've done," she hissed. "We've done what should have been done years ago," Eleanor replied calmly. Coleman turned to leave, then stopped. "This isn't over. I have resources you can't imagine. Connections." She was interrupted by her phone ringing. She answered, listened, and her face went from white to gray. "Your Cayman accounts," Eleanor said helpfully, "frozen as of 2 minutes ago. Swiss accounts, too. That property in New Zealand? Seized. Your domestic assets are being locked down as we speak. Morrison moved fast once he saw the evidence." Coleman dropped the phone. For the first time since Sarah had known her, the deputy director looked truly defeated. But then she smiled, a cold, terrible expression. "You think you've won? You have no idea what you've started. The people I answer to don't exist," Eleanor interrupted. "I know you want us to think there's some shadowy cabal above you, but Patricia, I've known you for 40 years. You're not a soldier, you're a queen, and queens don't serve anyone." Coleman's smile faltered. "Besides," Eleanor continued, pulling out a tablet showing financial records, "I have your real books. Not the ones you showed your supposed masters, but the real ones. You've been running this alone for 15 years, building your own empire while pretending to serve others. All right, this is it. The moment everything changes. Coleman's empire is crashing down, but she's got one last card to play. If you think she's going down without trying to take everyone with her, you haven't been paying attention. The next 5 minutes determine whether justice wins or whether Coleman's network survives to fight another day. Watch what happens when a cornered predator realizes there's truly no escape. Federal agents were moving closer now, Morrison himself emerging from one of the vehicles. He held a paper in his hand. A warrant, Sarah realized. Fresh from a federal judge. "Deputy Director Coleman," Morrison announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy, racketeering, murder for hire, and treason. The last word hung heavy. Treason carried the death penalty. Coleman looked at Eleanor one last time. "You've killed us both, you know. The enemies I've made, the people I've kept in check. They'll come for you now." "Let them come," Eleanor replied. "We'll be ready." The arrest was surprisingly quiet. Coleman didn't resist as they cuffed her, didn't speak as they read her rights. She was placed in a federal vehicle and driven away, news helicopters following the convoy. Sarah felt something shift in the air, a weight lifting, a shadow passing. 15 years of Coleman's influence ended in a parking lot in Oregon. "It's not over," Rebecca said quietly. "Her network will be dismantled piece by piece." Morrison interrupted, approaching them. "The warrants are being served nationwide as we speak. By dawn, 300 arrests. By noon, the entire network exposed." He turned to Eleanor. "You'll all need to testify. Grand juries, congressional hearings, possibly international courts." "We know," Eleanor replied. "We're ready." Morrison studied her for a long moment. "You played a long game, Eleanor, using your own daughters." "Protected them," Eleanor corrected. "Everything I did was to protect them from Patricia. She would have recruited them or killed them eventually. This way, they had a chance to fight back." "And the others? Your 17 assets?" "Are all volunteers who lost someone to Coleman's network. Every single one had personal stakes." Morrison nodded slowly. "The immunity deals are being drafted. You'll need to come in, all of you. Debriefing will take weeks." "After 6 a.m., Eleanor said firmly. "We watch the dawn first." Morrison looked like he wanted to argue, then thought better of it. 6 a.m. Don't be late. As the federal agents began withdrawing, taking Coleman's captured operatives with them, Sarah found herself standing with her family. Her sister she'd thought dead. Her mother she'd thought helpless. And somehow, Webb and Elena, who'd become part of this strange alliance. "Where do we watch the sunrise?" Webb asked. Eleanor smiled. "I know just the place." They returned to the Burger King. It had been sealed as a crime scene, yellow tape crisscrossing the entrances. But Eleanor had a key, of course she did, and they entered through the kitchen. The dining area was exactly as they'd left it. Overturned tables, scattered receipts, the cracked table 7 still bearing Thompson's impact. "Why here?" Elena asked. "Because this is where it started," Eleanor replied, settling into a booth with a clear view of the eastern horizon through the damaged windows. "And this is where it ends." They sat together in the pre-dawn darkness, 5 people who'd brought down an empire. Outside, they could hear sirens in the distance, arrests being made, the network being rolled up. Webb checked his phone. 5:45. 15 minutes until the package is released. "Any word from Coleman's remaining people?" Sarah asked. "Scattered chatter," Webb replied. "Some are trying to run. Others are destroying evidence. A few are turning themselves in, hoping for deals." Rebecca pulled out a tablet, showing feeds from news stations. "It's already breaking. Someone at the Post jumped the gun. McKenna's article just went live." They watched as the story exploded across media platforms. "Shadow Network controls federal law enforcement," read one headline. "Massive corruption scandal rocks Justice Department," proclaimed another. "Coleman's photo is everywhere," Elena observed. "She's finished. She was finished the moment she killed Robert," Eleanor said quietly. "It just took 20 years to prove it." Sarah studied her mother, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the suburban grandmother, not the disabled widow, but the spy who'd orchestrated Coleman's downfall with patience and precision. "Why didn't you tell us?" Sarah asked. "About Dad, about your plan." Eleanor was quiet for a moment. "Because you needed to be genuine. Your reactions, your choices, your independence, they had to be real or Patricia would have known. She knew every tell you had, every pattern. The only way to fool her was for you to not know you were part of the game. You used us, Rebecca said. But there was no anger in it, just understanding. I positioned you, Eleanor corrected. Just like Patricia did. The difference is, I made sure you had the tools to fight back when the time came. 5:55. Dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Through the broken windows, they could see the first rays of sunlight hitting the mountains. 1 minute, Webb announced. They watched his phone as the timer counted down. At exactly 6 a.m. Eastern, 3 a.m. Pacific, the packages released. 47 terabytes of evidence flooding into newsrooms, federal offices, and congressional committees simultaneously. Webb's phone immediately exploded with notifications. It's done. Everything's out there. Within minutes, news alerts were pinging on everyone's devices. Breaking! Hundreds of federal agents arrested in massive sting. Deputy Director Coleman's network exposed. Congressional investigation launched into shadow government. We did it, Sarah breathed. No, Eleanor corrected. We started it. The real work, rebuilding, reforming, ensuring this never happens again, that work is just beginning. Elena's phone rang. She looked at the caller ID, surprised. It's my father. She answered, and Sarah could hear rapid Spanish, emotional, grateful. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she spoke to her father for the first time in 3 years without fear. He's safe, she said after hanging up. Really safe. The marshals have him in protective custody, and the cartel has agreed to leave him alone in exchange for my testimony about Coleman's network. The sun was fully up now, streaming through the damaged Burger King, illuminating the destruction from the night before. But somehow, in that light, it didn't look like destruction anymore. It looked like transformation. Rodriguez entered through the front door, using a key the FBI had given him. Thought I'd find you here, he said. My wife is safe, the baby too. Thank you. Behind him came Mitchell, still looking like a homeless veteran but with federal credentials now visible. Morrison wants you all at the federal building by 8. Debriefing starts immediately. Sarah nodded, then looked at the cracked table 7. Something glinted in the morning light. The USB drive, the fake one Coleman had thought was real, still embedded in the damaged surface. She pried it free, examined it. Such a small thing to have started such a massive chain of events. You know what's funny? She said. None of this would have happened if Thompson hadn't dumped my food. I was just going to observe tonight, gather more intelligence. But when he got aggressive, you reacted, Rebecca finished. And that reaction exposed the USB, which brought Webb, which triggered Coleman's response, which activated Mom's 20-year endgame, Sarah concluded. Eleanor stood, dusting off her hands. Sometimes the smallest actions have the largest consequences. Your father taught me that. They began filing out of the Burger King, heading for their vehicles and the long debriefing ahead. But Sarah lingered, looking at the damaged restaurant one more time. This place would be repaired, would serve burgers and fries again. But it would also be remembered as the place where Coleman's empire fell. Where a delivery driver, a grandmother, and a group of unlikely allies had stood against corruption. And won. Sarah? Rebecca called. You coming? Yeah, Sarah replied, tucking the USB into her pocket as a memento. I'm coming. As they drove away, following the federal escort to the courthouse, Sarah's phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. Untraceable. The phoenix has risen. The ashes are scattered. But remember, fire always leaves embers. Be ready. A friend. She showed it to Eleanor, who read it with narrowed eyes. Someone else is out there, Eleanor said. Someone who was watching, waiting. Another enemy? Or another ally? Time will tell. The congressional hearing room was packed. C-SPAN cameras captured every moment as Sarah Miller testified before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Agent Miller, the committee chair began, your actions operated outside official channels. How do we prevent future shadow operations while maintaining necessary intelligence capabilities? Sarah leaned into the microphone. Senator, Coleman operated for 15 years because no one questioned a deputy director. No one verified her operations. The problem wasn't intelligence gathering, it was power without oversight. You're suggesting more oversight? I'm suggesting transparency, checks and balances. No single person should have Coleman's power. The hearing continued for hours. Sarah answered every question. Rebecca had testified yesterday, Eleanor the day before. Webb was scheduled tomorrow, Elena next week. The network was truly dead. 347 arrests, 192 convictions, more trials pending. Coleman herself was in solitary at a federal supermax, awaiting trial on 47 charges including treason. After the hearing, Sarah met Rebecca and Eleanor outside the Capitol. Morrison was there, now acting deputy director. You did well, he said, handing them folders. Task Force Phoenix, a new unit with rotating leadership and mandatory oversight. Mission, identifying corruption networks before they take root. I want you to build it. Sarah looked at her family. We'll think about it. As Morrison left, Elena and Webb joined them. Elena now worked for justice as a forensic accountant. Webb had returned to legitimate law, prosecuting the Coleman trials. Dinner? Webb suggested. I know a place with great burgers. They laughed, walking together. Eleanor showed them a news article. Burger King Memorial honors local heroes. The restaurant had reopened with Table 7 preserved behind glass. They're calling us heroes, Rebecca said. We're just people who saw something wrong and fixed it, Sarah replied. Her phone buzzed. Another encrypted message. Other phoenixes are rising. The fire spreads. Be ready to fly again. Still a friend. She deleted it but kept the warning. Coleman was done, but there were others out there. The Oak Ridge Burger King had become a tourist attraction. People came nationwide to see Table 7, to read the plaque. Sarah stood outside with Rebecca, who now ran a consulting firm fighting corporate corruption. Sarah carried everything she owned in a backpack. After the trials, she'd realized the fight against corruption needed guardians outside the system. Eleanor emerged with food for the road. Webb and Elena arrived from Portland, married now, expecting their first child. You sure about this? Elena asked. Disappearing again? Not disappearing. Repositioning, Sarah replied. She'd received 3 messages from a friend over the past year about new networks forming. Someone needed help stopping them early. An unmarked car arrived. Sarah hugged her family goodbye. When will we see you again? Rebecca asked. When you need me. The Phoenix network isn't dead. We transformed. She got in the car. As Oak Ridge disappeared, Sarah pulled out a new phone. The waiting message read, Welcome to the real game, Phoenix 1. Coleman was just the beginning. She typed back, Always. The phone rang immediately. An electronically distorted voice spoke. Hello, Sarah Miller. Let me tell you about Hydra. The voice outlined a conspiracy dwarfing Coleman's network. International scope, decades old, tentacles everywhere. Why tell me? Because Hydra killed my family. Like Coleman killed your father. Now we return the favor. Who are you? Phoenix 2. There are 7 total. You're the last. The circle is complete. When do we start? We already have. Check tomorrow's news. Hydra just lost their first head. The line died. Sarah looked at the dark highway ahead. She'd thought Coleman was the war. It was only a battle. The car drove on, carrying Sarah toward her next war. Behind her, civilization faded. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and purpose. Somewhere in Supermax, Coleman sat in her cell, thinking she'd lost everything. She had no idea her empire had birthed something worse. 7 phoenixes, risen from her victim's ashes, armed with her own methods. The hunter had become hunted. The game had changed. Back in Oak Ridge, the night manager locked the Burger King at 2 a.m. She paused at table 7, looking at the preserved crack under glass. She didn't know the whole story. Nobody did. A delivery driver had sat here once, trying to eat dinner in peace. That driver changed the world. The manager headed home, unaware that 3 blocks away, in an unmarked van, someone was watching, documenting, waiting. Phoenix 7, Oak Ridge's guardian, settled in for another night. Sarah Miller was gone, but her legacy remained. The Phoenixes were everywhere now, watching, ready. If another Coleman rose, if another network formed, they would be ready. The fire that started in this Burger King would never die. It would burn underground, invisible but eternal, waiting to rise again. Justice had learned to hide in shadows, and the shadows had learned to fight back. The secure facility had no official designation, no address that existed in any database. 7 screens glowed in the darkness, each showing a different city: Los Angeles, New York, Chicago, Houston, Phoenix, Philadelphia, San Antonio. Sarah stood before the screens, reading reports from each Phoenix operative. In Los Angeles, Phoenix 3 had just exposed a judge taking bribes from human traffickers. In New York, Phoenix 4 had prevented a police corruption ring from destroying evidence against a senator's son. Each victory was small, surgical, invisible to the public. Phoenix 1, this is 7. A voice crackled through encrypted comms. Oak Ridge remains secure. No signs of reorganization. Copy that, 7. Maintain surveillance. The door behind her opened. Rebecca entered, no longer in her business suit but in tactical gear similar to Sarah's. "I thought you chose the corporate path," Sarah said without turning. "I did, until I found 12 of my clients were Hydra shells." Rebecca moved to stand beside her sister. "Mom sends her regards. And fresh intel." She handed Sarah a drive. Financial patterns suggesting Hydra's moving assets to Southeast Asia. "They're adapting to our pressure." "Let them adapt," Sarah replied. "We'll adapt faster." Another screen lit up. Portland. Webb's face appeared, Elena beside him. "Phoenix 1, we've got something," Webb said urgently. "Remember Coleman's lawyer, the one who vanished during the arrests?" "Marcus Fitzgerald. He's resurfaced. New identity. New face thanks to surgery, but Elena caught his financial signature. He's rebuilding Coleman's network under a new name, Cerberus." Sarah and Rebecca exchanged glances. They'd expected this. Evil never truly died. It just changed faces. "Where?" "Miami. He's using hurricane recovery funds as cover for money laundering. Classic Coleman playbook, but updated for modern disasters." Sarah turned to the 7 screens, pressing a button that activated all channels simultaneously. "All Phoenix units, priority alert. Cerberus is active in Miami. This is not a drill. Coleman's disciples are trying to resurrect her network." 7 voices responded in sequence, each confirming readiness. "Phoenix 2, coordinate surveillance. 3 and 4, dig into the financial trails. 5, check for political connections. 6, monitor law enforcement infiltration. 7, prepare safe houses." "What about us?" Rebecca asked. Sarah pulled up a map of Miami, red dots appearing across the city, each representing a suspected Cerberus operation. "We're going hunting. But this time, we don't wait for them to grow strong. We kill Cerberus in its cradle." She looked at the preserved USB drive from Table 7, now mounted on the wall like a trophy. Below it, a simple plaque. "Small things topple empires." "Coleman taught us that power corrupts," Sarah said. "But she also taught us that corruption fears exposure. Every shadow network, every conspiracy, every would-be Coleman, They all have the same weakness. They need to hide, Rebecca finished. And we've become very good at finding hidden things. The screens flickered with new intelligence, the Phoenix network mobilizing across the country. In a federal supermax, Patricia Coleman had no idea that her legacy wasn't her corruption. It was the force she'd created to oppose it. 7 phoenixes, rising from ashes. And the war was just beginning. Sarah turned to face her sister one last time. You know what Mom always said about Coleman? That she confused fear with respect and control with justice. Sarah picked up her encrypted phone, typing a message to all Phoenix units. The fire that started in a Burger King has spread to 7 cities. Let it burn bright. Within seconds, 7 responses appeared, each containing a single word: rising. The shadows weren't just fighting back anymore, they were winning.
You are not alone. Someone wants to hear you. Share your story. Thank you for watching to the end. Please like and subscribe to Stereo.